You see, feeling spiritually stuck is far more common than most people admit. Many people think that a spiritual path is supposed to feel like a steady climb upward, a constant expansion, a continuous awakening, a smooth journey towards some higher clarity. But eventually it becomes obvious that this is not how inner growth actually works. What we call being stuck is often something else entirely, something far more meaningful than a simple obstacle. Awareness shows you that spiritual stagnation isn't caused by a lack of progress, but by a misunderstanding of what progress truly is. Most people think feeling stuck means something is wrong with them. They believe they're not meditating enough, not healing fast enough, not releasing their past the right way. They compare themselves to others and assume everyone else is evolving smoothly while they remain frozen in the same emotional place. But here's the deeper truth: no one is actually stuck. What feels like stagnation is the moment your consciousness refuses to move forward until you finally understand what you've been ignoring. The spiritual path does not rush. It waits for you. It pauses exactly where healing is required. The real reason you feel spiritually stuck is not because you're failing, but because you've reached a doorway that cannot be bypassed. Something in you is asking to be seen. Something you've avoided, minimized, or pushed aside. Something that has waited for years, maybe decades, for the right moment to rise. And when it rises, it feels like life stops. What people call being stuck is often a sign that the next stage of their awakening depends on a truth they haven't yet faced. Spiritual stagnation is not a punishment, but a signal, a pause, a necessary slowing so you don't continue life on autopilot, carrying the same emotional patterns into the next chapter. Think of it this way: when a river meets a rock, the water doesn't see it as failure. It simply flows around it or takes time to carve through it. But humans, we panic. We assume the rock means the river is broken. Awareness reveals something else. The rock is part of the river's path, and your inner stuckness is part of your awakening. You might feel stuck because your mind is trying to solve something your heart hasn't acknowledged. The mind wants progress, clarity, resolution, but the heart wants recognition, honesty, and integration. This conflict creates spiritual paralysis. You're pulled in two directions. One part of you wants to evolve, and another part of you is afraid to let go. This is why so many people stay suspended between who they used to be and who they know they could become, not because they're incapable, but because their inner world is still negotiating with their past. Feeling stuck is not failure. It's resistance meeting truth. Sometimes the truth is painful. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it contradicts the life you've built around your identity. So the mind rejects it, not because it's false, but because accepting it would require transformation. Transformation is beautiful, but it is rarely gentle. You may feel spiritually stuck because you are trying to awaken without releasing the version of yourself that feels safe, familiar, and predictable. The mind holds tightly to old beliefs, even limiting ones, because they create the illusion of stability. But awakening does not offer stability, it offers freedom, and freedom requires the courage to let go of who you are not. Spiritual stagnation also happens when you're trying to grow in the wrong direction, when you are forcing yourself into ideas of spirituality that do not match your own inner rhythm. Some paths encourage constant positivity, others demand strict discipline, others emphasize detachment. But if a path does not align with your nature, it becomes a cage instead of a doorway. Awakening cannot be imitated, it must be lived. You may feel stuck because you're trying to follow someone else's path instead of listening to your own. Awareness grows when you stop trying to perform spirituality and start listening to the subtle movements of your inner being. The truth is, spiritual progress is not measured by how calm you appear or how free you pretend to be. It is measured by your willingness to face yourself honestly. And honesty is uncomfortable. This is why many people feel stuck. They confuse discomfort with regression. But discomfort is not a sign of going backward. It is a sign that something real is shifting. Awareness does not expand by avoiding the dark. It expands by bringing light into it. You see, the spiritual path becomes stagnant only when you're trying to run from the very thing that would free you. When you feel stuck, ask yourself, what emotion am I afraid to feel? What truth am I avoiding? What chapter am I refusing to close? What belief am I still defending even though it hurts me? The answers are never convenient, but they are always liberating. Sometimes you feel stuck because a part of you knows exactly what needs to change, but the change feels too big, too disruptive, too frightening. And so you wait, suspended in an inner hallway between two versions of yourself. But that hallway is not a prison. It is preparation. Before every transformation, there is a pause. Before every insight, there is silence. Before every awakening, there is confusion. This confusion is not because you have lost your way, it is because your old map no longer works. Feeling spiritually stuck is the moment life takes the map from your hands, so you learn to navigate from a deeper place. Insight no longer comes from thought, but from presence. Wisdom no longer comes from effort, but from clarity. You begin to realize that you are not stuck at all. You are being redirected. And the path you are meant to take is waiting for the moment you finally stop resisting the truth you already know. Spiritual stagnation dissolves the moment you stop demanding progress and start allowing awareness. Because awareness does not push forward, it expands outward. And when it expands, everything previously hidden becomes visible. You don't move forward by force, you move forward by understanding. And the moment you understand the real reason you feel stuck, the path uncloses itself. The door that felt locked begins to open effortlessly, not because the obstacle disappeared, but because you finally saw what it was trying to teach you. What feels like stagnation is often the beginning of the deepest awakening you will ever experience. You see, spiritual stagnation is not just an emotional experience. It is a psychological, energetic, and existential intersection where several layers of your inner world collide at once. Many people believe that feeling stuck means they have lost their spiritual connection, but awareness eventually shows that the opposite is true. When you feel spiritually paralyzed, it is often because your consciousness is trying to grow faster than your old identity can handle. This creates a tension that feels like being trapped between two worlds. On one side, there is the life you once lived, familiar patterns, predictable behaviors, comfortable illusions. On the other side, there is a deeper truth, uncertain, expansive, unfamiliar, and transformative. And in the middle, there is you, feeling unable to move in either direction. This middle place is not failure. It is the friction that occurs when truth and habit collide. To understand this more clearly, imagine your old identity as a small container. Over time, as you begin to awaken, your awareness expands. It grows larger, more spacious, more open. But the container, your old self, does not expand with it. Eventually, the container becomes too small to hold who you are becoming. This is what creates the feeling of being spiritually stuck. Your inner world has outgrown the shape of your past, but you haven't yet released that past. Many people do not realize they are holding on to identities that can no longer support their awakening. They try to evolve while still clinging to old beliefs, old wounds, and old ways of seeing themselves. But awakening demands authenticity. It will not let you carry anything false into your next stage. Awareness does not negotiate with illusion, and illusion does not give up easily. This inner conflict can feel like stagnation, but in reality, it is a purification. It is life removing what can't continue with you. When you feel spiritually stuck, it's often because you're still holding on to a belief about who you think you're supposed to be, a version of you created by past pain, a fear that has shaped your choices for years, an identity based on pleasing others, a self-image built around survival, a dream that no longer belongs to you. These attachments are subtle. Sometimes they're so familiar that you don't even realize they're the very things blocking your growth. The spiritual path cannot move forward if the self you're trying to preserve is the same self that needs to be released. Spiritual stagnation is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that something within you is outdated. Another reason people feel spiritually stuck is because they expect awakening to feel good all the time. They expect clarity, serenity, and bliss. But awareness often grows through discomfort, not because the universe wants you to suffer, but because discomfort forces you to pay attention. Think of the moment before a snake sheds its old skin. It becomes tight, itchy, constricting. The snake is not dying, it's transforming, but the transformation feels uncomfortable until the old layer falls away. You experience a similar tension. Your old skin is everything you have outgrown: patterns, identities, emotional reactions, beliefs about what is possible for you. Awakening requires you to shed that skin, and the discomfort you feel is simply the pressure of expansion. If you misunderstand this phase, you will assume something is wrong. You will think you're regressing, losing connection, or failing. But the truth is much simpler. You're evolving, and evolution always creates friction. Another major cause of spiritual stagnation is emotional backlog, the accumulation of unprocessed feelings that have been ignored, suppressed, or minimized. These unresolved emotions act like knots in your energy. They slow your movement forward, not because they are obstacles, but because they contain insights you have not yet allowed yourself to receive. Every emotion carries intelligence. Anger carries boundaries. Sadness carries truth. Fear carries caution. Shame carries identity. Guilt carries responsibility. When you refuse to feel these emotions, you refuse to access the wisdom inside them. The spiritual path halts not because life stops speaking, but because you stop listening. It becomes obvious that the path remains stuck at the exact point where avoidance begins. Another layer of stagnation emerges when people try too hard. They push themselves to heal faster, awaken quicker, meditate longer, release their past immediately. But awakening cannot be forced. The harder you try to evolve, the more your mind tightens. Growth becomes rigid instead of fluid. Awareness expands when you stop forcing it. The more you push, the more resistance you create. The more you chase awakening, the more distant it feels. The more you demand clarity, the more confusion grows. Spiritual stagnation is often the result of trying to accelerate a process that unfolds only when you relax into presence. Growth happens in moments of openness, not pressure. You might also feel spiritually stuck because you are carrying expectations about what awakening should look like. You may have an image of what a spiritually evolved person is supposed to feel, speak, or behave like. These expectations create psychological cages. When you don't match the image, you assume you're failing. But awakening is not a performance. It is not a personality. It is not an aesthetic. It is an inward shift in how you perceive yourself and the world. Stagnation happens when you're trying to play a role instead of inhabiting your truth. There is also a deeper layer. Sometimes spiritual stagnation is a form of protection. Not all progress is safe for the emotional system at once. Awareness moves at the pace of your nervous system, not at the pace of your ambition. If moving forward would destabilize you, life will hold you in place, not to punish you, but to protect you. This stuckness is not resistance. It is timing. You grow when you are ready, not when you are impatient. Many people also confuse boredom with stagnation. When the initial excitement of spiritual awakening wears off, the journey becomes quieter, less dramatic, more ordinary. And because we live in a world addicted to stimulation, this quiet phase feels like stagnation. But in truth, this is where the deepest growth happens, in the silent spaces where nothing appears to be happening. Stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is integration. And finally, spiritual stagnation often arises when you attempt to move forward without resolving the past. Your consciousness cannot expand into the future while your heart is still anchored to old pain, old identities, or old stories about who you think you are. Life does not allow you to skip chapters. Every emotion must be felt. Every pattern must be understood. Every illusion must be seen clearly. Otherwise, awakening becomes another form of avoidance. If you feel spiritually stuck, it is not a dead end. It is an invitation to look deeper, to listen more honestly, to feel what you have avoided, to release what you have outgrown. When you stop seeing stagnation as failure, it transforms into guidance. When you stop resisting the pause reveals its purpose. When you stop trying to escape the moment becomes your teacher. You're not stuck, you're being instructed. And once you understand the instruction, the path opens effortlessly, revealing the next step with clarity and grace. You see, one of the most overlooked truths about spiritual stagnation is that the moment you believe you are stuck, you begin living inside the belief itself. And beliefs have gravity. They pull your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions into a specific shape. If you tell yourself you're stuck long enough, the mind starts building walls around that idea, even if the walls are imaginary. This is why spiritual stagnation feels so heavy. Not because life has stopped moving, but because your interpretation has awareness, eventually reveals that stagnation is rarely about the situation, and almost always about the meaning you've attached to it. When you interpret a pause as punishment, paralysis, or failure, you close the very doors that were trying to open. But if you reinterpret the same pause as preparation, integration, or protection, the energy shifts instantly. The stuckness loosens, your breathing changes, your perception expands. What once looked like a dead end begins to look like a threshold. The mind constantly creates narratives about where you should be, what you should have accomplished, and how far you should have evolved by now. These silent expectations create pressure, and this pressure becomes conflict. That conflict is what you mistake for spiritual stagnation, but life is not measuring you. Awakening does not use a stopwatch. Your path is not behind schedule. The real friction comes from comparing yourself to an imagined version of who you think you should already be. Spiritual stagnation is often a conflict between your timeline and life's timing. And life is always right. You might think, I should be more healed by now, or I should be more awakened, or I should already understand this. But every one of those thoughts is an attack on your current state. They deny what you're feeling. They deny where you are. They deny the intelligence of the present moment. Healing slows down the moment you start shaming yourself for not healing fast enough. Awakening slows the moment you demand it to happen on your terms. And growth stops the moment you insist you should already be bigger. So the real reason you feel spiritually stuck is that your mind has created an image of the future that your present self is still growing into. There is nothing wrong with this. In fact, it's natural. But the suffering comes from believing you're supposed to already be there. You are not late. You are becoming. Another important piece many people overlook is this. Sometimes you feel spiritually stuck because you're waiting for a breakthrough that already happened, but you didn't recognize it. Awakening rarely looks dramatic from the inside. It often feels subtle, quiet, or ordinary, almost too ordinary to notice. You expect fireworks, but the real transformation happens the way dawn arrives, slowly, softly, almost imperceptibly, until you suddenly look around and realize everything is brighter. Your awareness has already expanded in ways you haven't acknowledged. Your intuition is already sharper than it was a year ago. Your emotional reactions have already softened compared to your past. But because you're expecting awakening to feel mystical at every moment, you overlook the evidence of your own growth. You think you're stuck, but you're actually adjusting to a higher level of consciousness that feels unfamiliar. It's like moving into a bigger home with more rooms, more space, more quiet. At first, you don't know where anything is. You feel lost, confused, unsettled. Not because the home is wrong, but because your nervous system is learning how to inhabit it. Spiritual stagnation is often not stagnation at all. It is spaciousness you don't yet know how to navigate. Another reason people feel stuck is because they are carrying a subtle illusion, the desire to reach a final version of themselves, a place where all pain disappears, all doubts dissolve, and all questions are answered. But there is no final version. Awakening is not a destination. It is a continuous deepening into the truth of who you are. The moment you believe there is somewhere to arrive, you will always feel stuck where you are. Awareness grows in spirals, not straight lines. You revisit old patterns, not because you have failed, but because each return allows you to see them at a deeper level. You revisit old fears, not because you haven't healed, but because you are now strong enough to face them without collapsing. You revisit old pain, not because you're moving backward, but because the healing is finally reaching the places that were once too tender to touch. You're not stuck. You're completing the circle. Another hidden cause of stagnation is isolation, not from people, but from yourself. When you lose connection with your inner voice, when life becomes loud and distracting, when your emotional life is rushing faster than your awareness can keep up, you start to feel like you're drifting away from your spiritual path. But your path is not something you can lose. You are the path. Disconnection happens not because the path disappears, but because you temporarily stop listening. And the moment you turn inward again, even for one breath, the path becomes clear. You might also feel spiritually stuck because you're waiting for motivation to move forward. But awakening does not move through motivation. It moves through sincerity. It moves through honesty. It moves through presence. Motivation fluctuates constantly. Awareness does not. The path opens not when you feel ready, but when you feel true. And sometimes the truest thing you can say is, I feel lost, or I feel empty, or I don't know what to do next. These moments of raw honesty create space, and in that space, clarity emerges naturally. Another layer of stagnation comes from resisting the very experiences designed to free you. Pain, confusion, uncertainty. These are not signs you've fallen off your path. They are the path. They are the exact forces that reshape the old identity so the new awareness can emerge. If you avoid discomfort, you avoid transformation. Awakening does not happen inside comfort. It happens in the moments that stretch you, the moments that challenge your ego, the moments that force you to surrender control. You feel stuck because you're being stretched. You feel stuck because you're being softened. You feel stuck because life is preparing you for a version of yourself you haven't yet met. Another truth is this: you feel spiritually stuck when you haven't yet forgiven yourself. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It's about releasing the belief that your past defines what is possible for you. When you carry shame, guilt, or regret, your growth slows because part of you is still living backward. Awakening requires presence, and presence cannot exist while you are mentally punishing yourself for old mistakes. Your spiritual path begins to move again the moment you stop treating yourself as someone who must earn worthiness. You do not grow because you are worthy, you grow because growth is your nature. The real reason you feel spiritually stuck is not because your path has stopped moving, but because you have forgotten how to trust yourself, not the self shaped by fear or expectation. but the deeper self, the witness, the awareness, the quiet intelligence that has carried you through every moment of your life. When you reconnect with that presence, stagnation dissolves like mist in sunlight, and you realize something powerful. You were never stuck. You were being held. You were being prepared. You were being softened. You were being expanded. You were being shaped by something wiser than your mind. Spiritual stagnation does not mean you've lost direction. It means the direction is changing. It means the next chapter requires a different version of you, one that cannot be rushed, forced, or pushed into existence. When you understand this, the stillness becomes peaceful, the uncertainty becomes spacious, the pause becomes purposeful, and you begin to trust the deeper rhythm of your awakening, the rhythm that has been guiding you all along, even in the moments that felt like nothing was happening. You're not stuck on your path. You're standing at the doorway of a new one, and once you recognize that, the path opens effortlessly beneath your feet.